This is an open letter to Elon Musk, and whoever is interested in the problem of population and population collapse, I think they call it, or something like that. Here's the thing. Uh, all comes down to a question of fart. Farting. That's passing hot air through your asshole, which we call farting. The norms, there are no legal restrictions on farting, not as far as I know of, but they're all norms that social norms, are erected around the problem of fart, which we all do, which is we have been doing it ever since creation. All animals do it. It's a byproduct of decomposition of food matter inside our intestine. So there are still no legal boundaries regarding farting, but there are many social boundaries regarding farting. As such, it would be as such is those social restrictions regarding farting. You can basically comes down to, if you're alone and you fart, that's no problem. Let it rip all day long. Nobody cares. Nobody knows. If nobody can hear it, it's all fine. Or smell it, it's all fine. Then you have there are some social norms, social restrictions with regards to farting when you're with family, or at least one other person, that, let's say, your partner. When you're with your partner, what is the idea? The idea is, again, there are no legal limits, but there are social norms, and if you do one too many times, your partner is going to, you're not going to hear the end of it from your partner until, you understand that this is not acceptable when we are together, which is probably like 8-10 hours a day, 12 hours a day when partners are together, when people are married. So that's another restriction. Then when you are in a room with multiple people, let's say in a doctor's office, you have a social norm with regards to farting, that you don't do it. No amount, not even once, is acceptable. If you're with your partner, if you fart once a night, it may be acceptable. Your partner may let it slip, just like you. But in a doctor's office, it's not socially acceptable to even fart once. And if you do, you're not going to hear the end of it either. So my point is this, the concentration of population determines what are the norms. And if you extrapolate that, you can say the concentration of population determines also the laws. The laws governing a high concentration of people, somewhere that the concentration of people is higher, the laws governing that is much more restrictive than the laws trying to govern a dispersed group of people, a dispersed number of people that are, far apart, living far apart. And it's logical, because when the environment is restricted, when the space is cramped, you need to have both social norms, very strict social norms, and very strict legal norms, legal matters, to make existence in a cramped space bearable or frictionless, not too much friction. If you erect enough laws and enough social norms, you're basically, restricting. You're trying to make, uh, you know, living, existing in that society, in that cramped environment, frictionless. That's the whole point of social norms and legal norms. That's the whole point of them, is to make living in a concentrated society with less friction, and therefore less fighting, less uh, waste of resources. What is a war? It's a waste of resources. It's a waste of human life, waste of productivity, waste of resources. All the resources goes up in smoke during a war, during a fight, during a civil war or international war. Doesn't matter. Resources go to waste, all up in smoke. The shells and the guns, it just creates just smoke, and there goes, $5, or smoke, there goes $500,000. Uh, and then there is the buildings that, time and productivity has been spent, money, productivity, human time and human life has been spent to building those structures, and then, a bomb is used to demolish that structure. So the point is this: to prevent waste of time, waste of resources in conflict and war, you come up with social norms and legal laws and legal norms, and in order to prevent friction, which will, result in war and fighting, which is a waste. To prevent friction, you come up with social norms and legal norms. Well, when the society is cramped, living on top of each other, you need to come up with more stricter and more social norms and legal norms. Such is the case of Japan. Japan is a society. It's a very concentrated society. We're talking about, their videos that have for many years. Salute. There are videos that have come out of Japan that shows at one time of the day during, for example, rush hour. There's this uh, away perspective, distant perspective on a crossing, in which during the rush hour in the morning or afternoon, you see these waves of people moving from one side of the street to the other, and the other side to this side, and they all moving in a circle. It's a swarm of people, and well, they're comfortable with that. They have, not that they're comfortable, they have become comfortable. I don't think humans were meant to exist due to our long duration of evolution as primates and in small groups. I still think humans are more comfortable in populations of not more than 100. If you have to meet more than 100 people during your daily work, during just not work, just in your daily interactions, if you have to meet more than maybe even 50 people, you're not, as a human being, as who has evolved out of primates, lower primates, you're not going to be comfortable as a human being. It's not a normal environment for humans to be concentrated like bees in a beehive. It's just not. We are not. Our brain is not designed for that. So the point is this: the Japanese didn't have any option. It's a small island, large number of people try to exist in a small island, so everything has to be optimized, in especially space. So they live on top of each other. Capsule hotels are it's a very accepted part of, Japanese life and Japanese travel or something like that. It's unthinkable for somebody like me to live, to sleep or live in a capsule kind of environment. But I'm sure I also can get used to it if I have to. But the point is this: that Japanese have already got used to all these concepts with regards to which is a byproduct of cramped spaces, a cramped environment, shortage of space. And many enjoy, larger numbers. I don't know how or why, but many do enjoy it apparently, the concentration of people. But the point is this, that Japan is what is happening in Japan with regards to their population and the population drop is in my view, I could be wrong, is a byproduct of the concentration of population. As like this, if you want to break it down, it's quite simple. You can break it down say that the higher concentration of people leads to more restrictive laws and social norms. For example, they probably have some kind of, you know, laws against farting in closed doors, or in, not only, I'm sure they have their social norm that is against farting. I'm sure even in their legal uh, matters there must be something about farting in groups of people. So what I'm trying to say is the higher you concentrate the people, the more restrictive social and legal norms have to become in order to prevent friction in the society, in order to allow the existence of the higher concentration of people. Now, one of the side effects of the social norms becoming more restrictive in order to prevent friction in the society, highly concentrated society, in order to make to prevent friction, restrict more restrictive social norms and legal norms, and with that, a side effect, this is the important part, side effect of more restrictive social norms and legal norms is people isolation of people. People try to isolate themselves, separate themselves, restrict themselves from the society more and more and more, uh, to prevent breaking any of those restrictive social norms and legal norms. So you find people in Japan is they are self-restricting. They go and have a nap in a capsule hotel because you know napping on a chair next to another person with the possibility of leaning over and putting your head on top of the guy sitting next to you, or that's very socially unacceptable, very unacceptable socially. So because, for example, I don't know that, but I'm just saying that you can deduct that these, because of high concentration of people, to prevent friction in a society, they come up with highly restrictive social norms and legal norms, which we already know Japan has. A side effect of that restricted society is the isolation of people. People trying to isolate themselves in order to not run afoul of all those social norms and legal norms that is enacted or erected all around them in their society, because they are highly concentrated, because they need those restrictive norms, be it social or legal, in order to prevent any friction in a society and allow a high concentration of people to live next to each other. From so as a cause of high concentration of people, you reach the effect of isolation of people. What is the effect of people seeking isolation more and more? Is that they don't get together, they don't have sex, they have no children. So you can maybe you can call it a self-regulatory mechanism. If we don't go to war, if humans don't go to war and kill each other off in large numbers, it seems that the system by itself reaches a equilibrium in which the high concentration of people leads to more restrictive social and legal norms, which leads to people seeking more isolation in order to, in order to, uh, you know, be immune from breaking any of those complicated social and legal norms. Uh, and that seeking isolation leads to more isolation, leads to uh, people not even trying to seek mates, or trying to form a two-member group as a with a mate and reproduction, because that also too many restriction, the mind start working towards, okay, I need to separate myself from this fucking society, because apparently if I put my foot in front, my one foot in front of the other foot the wrong way, I'm somehow breaking some kind of social or legal norm. So either socially I'm going to be outcast, or legally I'm going to be cast in a prison. So the point is this: the higher population, more concentrated population, leads to the system by itself becoming people, forcing people to become more isolated, and therefore having less children. And that forms some kind of equilibrium. I don't think we're going. Here's the thing, Mr. Elon Musk. I don't think we're going to have a population collapse, because the system will reach an equilibrium. Okay, the population will go down. Okay, until there is enough room for people to distance themselves from one another. Until there is enough room, so the restrictive social norms and legal norms would no longer be necessary, or necessary to implement, or there is not enough, law enforcement to implement because of the large distances, or there are no complaints to implement any of those restrictive social and or legal norms. I give you an example. Salute. I give you an example. Imagine a person having a dog. If you have a dog inside the city, and the dog misbehaves a couple of times in a matter that is very much affecting your property or your sanity, you may once, as a matter of you know controlling the dog's behavior, you may once turn around and kick your dog to make sure that pain reminds him that he shouldn't do that anymore, because the pain comes back to in his memory that, oh, if I do that, the pain is going to be inflicted on me, so I won't do that. So that in a city, if you do that in a city, in a highly concentrated area of this planet, which is a city, uh, there's going to probably one of the neighbors are going to see it, and based on how concentrated the society is that you're living in that area, you can determine how strict their legal and social norms are. And if it's very highly concentrated, and one of your neighbors, two of your neighbors, couple of your neighbors see you kicking the dog, the next thing you know, you might have the police at your door, basically knocking on your door and say, hey, we heard you are abusing your dog, and we want to know why, what happened, what's going on, are you abusing animals now? Maybe you're going to have a legal problem if you abuse animals, and that sounds reasonable. But this is all relative. It's a relative matter, because when you're living in a concentrated city, concentrated area of this world, in a very populated city, yeah, that's restricted, very restricted social and legal norms, including what you can and cannot do with regards to pets. Your pet, which is in today's society in 2023, your pet is your property, but still you're very restricted on how you can deal with your pet. Now take the same example and take this man and his dog, or this woman and his dog, take him to the countryside, way in the middle of nowhere. Then if the dog misbehave too often with regards to some matter or not, there is a big chance that the farmer is going to take the dog behind the barn and shoot him. And just, let the vultures deal with with him. The point is this: he has many other dogs, so just get rid of the troublemaker. But there's not going to be any, because there are nobody complaining, nobody investigating, therefore nobody investigating, therefore becomes the idea of would a tree make a sound if it falls in the forest and nobody can hear it? So nobody saw it, nobody heard it, everything is fine. Therefore, this is what I'm saying when I say when people are distanced from each other, many of the laws, restrictive laws and restrictive social norms which are necessary when the society is cramped, living on top of each other, many of those legal and social norms are no longer even necessary to implement, because it's so far and wide that it's just inefficient. It becomes very it's no longer going to be practical to enforce those laws on people who live in such distances, dispersed apart, and nobody saw it, nobody heard it, everything is fine. This is what I'm saying. And the same thing goes with the guy's wife or family. If, if they have a disagreement, if they start, yelling and talking and crying and screaming and then making up and having sex, this is what normal marriages is. It's kicking and screaming and crying and fighting and then making up and having sex and reproducing. This whole process is disrupted many times when the population is concentrated in cities. This process is interrupted because the police arrives in the middle of fighting because one of your neighbors heard too much screaming and he was trying to watch TV, so he called 911 or he called the police and say, hey, there is a domestic disturbance here, send somebody here to sort things out. So the police arrives. What they do is they break up the fight and disagreement and whatever, kicking and screaming, and then the man is sent on his way to sleep on a bench in a park, and the woman takes over the house. And that's in short term, and in long term, again, it becomes divorce, and again the man is told he has to hit the road, and the woman takes the house. So short term and long term, the man is kicked out of the house, and the woman takes over the house. My point is this: the process is disrupted. Of course, there's going to be friction in a marriage. Two people living together is going to be a fucking friction. If the two don't have a set specific, they don't abide by a set of social and legal norms, at least social norms, their problem is going to be set up into the legal alleyways of the society, and they're going to end up in divorce. So unless a family follows a strict set of socially, that's society, that's social. Now it's different. Socially acceptable norms in a Mormon family is different from a socially acceptable norms in an Orthodox Jewish family as different from socially acceptable norms in a Hindu family or a Muslim family. My point is this: the idea is following a strict set of social norms. If they do it, there is a chance, even in a concentrated society, they they both know how to behave in each situation because they are following strictly a strict set of social norms. Therefore, the law will get involved much less. There is much less need of the involvement of the law, and then there is a much better chance of these people, living and reproducing and having many children because they're following a strict set of social norms. Again, this strict set of social norms is the issue. In such a place such as Japan, these strict set of social and legal norms separates people apart from each other, uh, with the idea of freedom. You're free to do what you want when you want. Therefore, in order to do what you want where you want, you seek isolation because you want to do what you want, and you also don't want to break any social or legal norms. However, if you're living in a very crowded city, in the West, what I'm saying is the West probably is going to follow, if the West doesn't start following the traditional mostly religious, the traditional religious guidelines with regards to how to deal with your family. If the West doesn't follow that, eventually the West is going to follow the Japanese example, in which isolation would result in less reproduction and collapse. Not collapse. I say the population will decrease until it reaches an equilibrium, until the people have enough space to separate from each other. So, in order to come up with their own social norms, and then have their fights and make up, and but still stay together and reproduce. That's the only and at equilibrium, and that again that follows the same thing. I think they will reproduce and increase the population, and again population concentrated, more social and legal restrictions until the population decreases and people separate from each other. And it's a cycle. What I'm trying to say, it's a cycle, Mr. Elon Musk. It's not going to be a population collapse. If we don't get people killed in a massive wars such as World War One and World War Two, and all those colonial wars that Europeans took part in, like the Belgians killing 10 million Congolese in a matter of decade. If that system, that path is not followed, if we don't get rid of people by war, the population will naturally decrease because people seek isolation, and that isolation will do, will decrease the population until the point that those people who are left have enough room, space to move away from each other, and the lack of social and legal restriction, or the impractical, yeah, unpractical, or use use of social or legal norms will result into people, even when they fight or argue or do a lot of bad shit to each other, still they stay together and make up and reproduce and have children, and increase the numbers. So my point is this: leave it to the people, Mr. Elon Musk. You can't. The concentration of people determines how many people can exist. Um, unless you restrict people in some kind of a religious bond, such as, in Judaism, and in another way, you force people, unless you force people to follow certain regulations, rules, social norms, that the, the larger society would not get involved. That's why you see, for example, the Orthodox Jews in United States concentrated in one area in New York, in one area, because I'm sure they also have fights, but the reason they stay together, their husband and wife stay together and have so many children, is that one, the husband and wife, they both try to follow strict set of rules. Doesn't matter what the rules are. The idea is following, is both parties understanding the rules and following the rules. And then when there is a disagreement, the law doesn't get involved. The legal norms do not apply, because that society in that area that are concentrated, they don't allow the outsiders to come and interfere. So even if there is an argument between two Orthodox Jewish folks, husband and wife, there is very little chance the law will get involved, because nobody will report it. Their neighbors are of their own kind. They understand, just like they have fights, the neighbors also have fight, and they probably would get involved themselves and try to sort out their neighbors' issues before they call the police. And that's because they all follow the certain strict social norms, which is in the faith, which is written in a book or whatever. The same goes with, really religious Muslim people, really religious Christian people, really religious Hindu people. These traditional environments results into people not having the legal establishment involved, and even if there are issues, it will get resolved internally. Therefore, it doesn't result into divorce, because usually when the law gets involved, it pushes the two sides more towards divorce, because it gives the right to one side, and doesn't, the whole thing becomes a legal matter, and both sides become more upset. And that again goes back to the idea of this equality. And here's the thing: you want to understand stable marriage. Stable marriage is a marriage that one side, you normally the man is the boss, because this idea of equality doesn't work in a group setting. In a group setting, the hierarchy needs to be determined before a group can move anywhere, do anything. A hierarchy has to be established. This idea of democracy, we're going to vote and everybody has equal rights and everybody is equal, yeah, the hierarchy has to be, if the group needs to do something, the hierarchy needs to be established, period. And the hierarchy, because the man is physically the stronger one, usually the man would have been considered the the leader of his household, unless the woman was extremely smart and was able to take control without the man being upset, because the woman has been much smarter, and you know and the man has accepted willingly to allow the decision making to be made by the woman. But that has to be proven. Normally it's the man who makes most of the decisions. Traditionally made most of the decisions in the house, and the hierarchy started from the man and his wife, and then the children, and blah blah blah, go down the thing. This hierarchy, which is something that I believe creates the stability in the family, But this idea of no hierarchy and everybody has equal rights and we take a vote, this, I'm sorry, this means equal rights means more friction. Means means more friction. More friction means a bigger chance of internal strife, war, which means separation, which means less sex, which means less reproduction, which means lower population numbers in the population. Period. As simple as that. To prevent this, there's no way to prevent it. You either have to force everybody to go backwards, not backwards, but go back to religion and follow some strict rules. Doesn't matter which religion, as long as everybody starts following some strict rules with regards to their life and their partners and their family. Unless everybody starts following those, goes back to following some strict rules, which I kind of doubt it, it's not going to happen. Therefore, then you have to accept that you're going to have a situation in which there is population explosion. Then due to high population numbers, you have more restrictive social and legal norms, which leads to more isolation, which means to decrease in population, which means people distancing from each other, which means then with distance comes the attractiveness of being together and forming a family. And because there is distance between these people, these families, there is less involvement of the law and less restrictive laws and norms, which leads to families staying, husband and wife staying longer together through much more arguments and difficulties and fights, and resulting in more and more children, and the population start increasing again. So it's not something that can be forced on people, Mr. Elon Musk. What I'm trying to say is there is also this experiment that was done with mice, not even with human beings. Salute. There was this experiment that was done with mice. You can find it in Wikipedia, that even mice, when they put, like, I think 10, 20 or something mice in a room that the scientists can observe quite clearly, and they put these 20, and they gave them food and water as much as they wanted, all you can eat, for the mice. So what happens, and they observed these mice over a period of, I think, 6 months or a year, couple of years, I don't know. But the idea was this. The hypothesis was that the mice will keep reproducing and reproducing until this room becomes full of mice, and they are all on top of each other, and there is no restriction. They keep reproducing until they drown in mice. The room becomes full of mice on top of each other. That was the hypothesis. But what happened, because when the food and water and is available, the idea is they produce until they die, until there's no more air. But what did actually happen in and you can find this on Wikipedia, what actually happened is that the population increased to a certain point. I think from 2030 the population increased to 120, 130, something like that, and then it stayed there for a short time and then started decreasing, and until it reached 90 or 100 or 80, somewhere around there, and then it plateaued. So it's up, down, plateau. And so what they observed was that although there was enough food and water for them to reproduce as much as they can in this large population of mice, although there was no restrictions, but the population plateaued. And the reason was simple, that they saw once a population passes a certain point limit, uh, some groups of population become very aggressive towards each other. Although there is no need for it, there is food, enough food for everyone, enough water for everyone, but they start fighting each other, very aggressive. Now these are mice. These are the most primitive form of mammals possible, which we are related to, and they behave in this way. So there's no question that we behave the same way. We tend to behave the same way. So certain groups started fighting each other for no reason whatsoever, killing each other in fights for no particular reason, no specific reason. And there were certain groups of mice that they started isolating themselves, although there was enough room to couple and reproduce, and you know they felt no need to you know couple and reproduce and blah blah, so they isolated themselves. So you have this group of mice that are killing each other for no apparent reason. Then you have a group of mice who are isolating themselves for no apparent reason. And then so only a group, a specific number, more or less, of these mice have decided that they reproduce. And the number that these guys reproduce was always enough to sustain the population in a plateau. So what I'm trying to say is this, Mr. Musk, uh, you're not going to have a population collapse. It's not, the light of consciousness is not going to go extinct because humans haven't reproduced. It's just going to, it has gone up. It's going to come down somewhat, maybe a third, maybe a quarter is going to come down, and then it's going to plateau. Unless, you open Mars and beyond, and, there is more space over there, so more people can go over there, some people can go over there and reproduce over there, and because there is more space, uh, there is there is going to be more mice. I'm sorry, people. The point is this. Uh, just like mice, it seems the strictness of space is determines how many people, how much your population can go up, how much your population can increase. And if your space is very restricted, as the cities are, uh, and maybe if you want to increase the population, you know if you populate the country, if you encourage people to move to to move away from each other and move away from cities and move to countryside, and that comes with the necessity that if you want people to move to the countryside and away from each other, in uh, so they can have more freedom to deal with their families, and in order to do that, you have to provide the countryside with a lot of amenities, that you know the internet and drinking water and uh, other amenities that are available in large cities. If you can provide them to the countryside, probably, if people will want to distance from each other, in which case with distance comes more freedom and less restrictions, social and legal, which means families are formed and more children are reproduced.